All right, guys, this is a really, really important video that anybody under 1,000 in particular really, really should watch and go over in detail. I'm really excited to share this with you. So this is a live lesson that I gave last week with Jim. Now, I have Jim's permission to share the lesson, so he's completely happy for me to share it. Jim is one of the members of Chess Boot Camp Live, and so he's been on some of our sessions, but he reached out to me direct and said I could do it some one-to-one training. So what we actually do with Chess Boot Camp is I will give lessons at a discounted rate, one-to-one lessons to Chess Boot Camp Live members, if we can also use it as educational content. So this lesson that you're about to see is part of the library on Chess Boot Camp Live, along with all the sessions from the previous weeks. We've done 5 sessions already, and it's going really, really well. Got some awesome feedback from everyone. So, thanks to everyone who's joined, and thanks to everyone who's participated and given me your feedback. I'm completely overwhelmed with that. But this method, this is the thing that I really want to communicate, is that catching what you miss in real time it's the essence of what Chess Boot Camp Live is about, but it's also the way that I've always done my lessons, right? And it doesn't matter, we can do a lesson, and very often we don't finish a game, right? We'll normally pick a game against the bot, and I'm looking for the students' thought process, but particularly what are the biggest gaps in their thinking right now, right? We're not looking to polish anything, okay? And we're not looking to get hundreds and hundreds of points, a growth in rating very, very quickly, although there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. But so what are the next steps along the path for each individual? And the way to do that is to hear them talking through their process in real time. Okay, videos can't do it for you, books can't do it for you, nothing can do it for you except for working with a more experienced player live. So that is the whole point of what we do, and we've been doing it live in our sessions as well. We've been taking on games and having multiple participants communicate their thought process and see what they can add. What about this? What about that? And it's absolutely wonderful. So anyway, I really encourage you to watch this. If you're sub 1,000, watch this. Go over it a few times in detail. It will massively, massively help your chess improve without having to spend any money as well. So enjoy, everybody. Okay. So the way that I normally do these is, I'll just kind of get the lay of the land first, and then what we'll do is we'll do a live game, either against a bot or an unrated game against a human, whatever you prefer. Okay. And the purpose of it is for me to try and understand what's next for you in your growth, what's next along your journey, that path that you're on, in terms of really just reading the board, figuring out what your choices are, and then deciding on the best choice. That's all chess is, isn't it? We say, I get a move, you get a move, I get a move, you get a move. The people whoever makes the best moves wins the game. So now, in your message, you told me that you kind of had a confidence hit. Is that right?
Big time, yeah.
So tell me about that. What do you think? Where do you think that's coming from? How does it feel? And
well, let's see. I don't exactly know where it's coming from. I've been playing for about a year. From there, let's see. I got up to my big goal of 500. As soon as I hit 500, I went right back down to 400. Then I played for a little while, a few months, and then I finally got up to 600, which was my goal, and I shot right down to 500 again. Not really sure what's going on. The way I've kind of learned to play just by watching videos on YouTube. Like I told you, I started with the goldfish to help me see the board better. But when I play, I don't see it the way I see it on your video, So yeah, I blunder a lot. Big blunders, not small ones. They're, usually I miss the queen, and they'll have like a bishop way off in the corner that I hadn't seen in plays, So there's that. Knowing how to attack is kind of a big thing for me because I don't really know how. The big thing I mostly go for is I try to fight for the center the 2 center columns. And if I can strike from there and come right back, that's what I do. So I don't know. Hopefully you can tell me what I'm doing wrong.
Hope so. Cool. Okay, well, why don't you go ahead and share your screen, and then we will pull up a game. So the point of this is we don't have to do a complete game, all right? I mean, it'd be great if we could, but if we do 10 moves, then 10 moves is fine, because what this is about is you seeing what you need to be doing that you aren't doing right now in order to read the board better, basically. So we'll take it very slowly. I'll just get you to tell me what you see on the board, and I will give you my input as we go along. So yeah, you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I'm having trouble. It says, do you want to do desktop or application?
Okay, so your application would be your browser that you've got, chess.com or whatever.
Oh.
Or you can do the whole desktop will just, I'll see whatever you see on your screen. So you may as well just do the browser.
All right. Do you see it?
Yep. There we go.
I don't see you at all. You're nowhere to be found right now.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. All right. So you can either choose a human being or choose a computer bot, whatever you.
I'll choose the bot, I think.
Okay. So play computer.
Let's see.
So you've hit 1,000 in puzzle. That's cool. Do you play the bot so much?
Which one do you think I should go against?
I would pick one that you haven't beaten that's maybe higher rated than you. So who's next after Jimmy? Who's the second?
Let's see.
So you've beaten Jimmy. That's good.
Well, I've played a lot of them.
They're the adaptive ones. Okay.
All right. So
who's that?
Who's this? 1,200? No.
Okay.
Nisha's at 900. And Jimmy.
So you've beaten Jimmy before?
Yeah. You want to take on Nisha?
We'll have a go at Nisha. Yeah. We'll go, challenge. You can go white or random or whatever you want.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to take this really slow. So how do you normally start when you've got the white pieces?
Well, usually what I do is I do E4 to start.
Okay.
I want to try to establish the center for myself.
There is no better way to start the game. Let's do E4. Okay. E5.
Now this one, what I would do is I would take, I would put the knight on C3.
Okay, so you're a Vienna player like me.
Oh, is that what it is? I don't know. I just, like I said, I pieced it together from videos.
The Vienna opening, and I love it. I play it. Christina plays it. It's really good. It's not that common, but okay. So we see this a lot. The opposite knight coming out. That makes a lot of sense in openings. Do you know why the opposite knight quite often comes out?
Well, I figure they're trying to establish the center also.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But if you look at it, which 2 squares in the center? So the center is literally the middle 4 squares on the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which 2 squares in the center is your knight on C3 covering?
Let's see. It's covering D5 and E4.
Okay, and they are the 2 light squares in the center, right? So when black has developed their knight to F6, that's jumped from a light square onto a dark square. So that knight is... Oh, my dog's making a noise. That knight is also looking at the same 2 squares, you see?
Yes.
So in a way, that knight is preventing your knight from, say, jumping to D5. So it very often makes sense to develop the opposite-sided knight to the one that your opponent's just developed. We see that a lot. Okay. So do you have a normal continuation from here? I mean, I know what I do from here.
Yeah, I usually will put the knight on, what is that, F3.
Okay. Well,
that covers the other 2 squares.
You can do that. Okay, so now we have 4 knights. This is the 4 knights game. Okay, so she's copied you again and put her knight in the middle. So we have a symmetrical board. Okay. So what I do is I move my F pawn first before I move my knight. I move my pawn from F2 to F4, which is the Vienna Gambit, which is kind of fun, kind of sharp. Okay, so
Why do you move the F? Is that to protect the pawn in the center?
it's to, well, what you're trying to do to if you play F4 on the previous move, you're trying to tempt black into capturing with his E pawn on F4, right? And then you push your E pawn forwards and attack the knight. And actually, the knight has nowhere to go. The knight has to retreat all the way back to its starting square.
Oh, okay.
So that's the Vienna Gambit, and it gets very good results for me. So, but okay, we have a 4 knights. All right, so we're not going to move. We're not going to make loads and loads of moves. That's not the point. Hello, Woody. So, what phase of the game are we in right now? You know, the 3 main phases.
I would say we're still in the opening.
Absolutely, yeah, we're in the opening phase, and we're in the opening phase until you've got your minor pieces out into the board, your knights and your bishops, castled your king, and developed your queen. Okay, very often in that kind of order, but not always. So normally you develop knights before bishops. We've done that, so good start. Next up is bishops. Now, one of your bishops can come straight out into the board if it wants to, right now.
Yeah, that's usually what I do. I usually put it on D3.
Okay.
Or D4 or C4, depending on my mood.
Mm-hmm. D3 actually makes a problem for you, which is
it blocks.
Yeah, because it blocks the D pawn. Okay, so the D pawn has an important job to try and compete for the center kind of structurally, and also if you look at your bishop on C1, right?
Okay.
So your C1 bishop is a dark squared bishop, right? Mm-hmm. And in order for that bishop to come out into the board, I mean, right now it's controlling nothing, right? It's useless. It's, it's protecting the pawn on B2. It's protecting the pawn on D2, and that's all it's doing, which is a very inefficient use of a bishop. So you want this bishop to come out into the board where it can see nice, long, dark square diagonals, and control a lot more squares on the board. But in order for that bishop to come out into the board, right, one of 2 pawns has to move. And it's one of those 2 dark squared pawns. It's either the B2 pawn, which is blocking a dark square, or it's the D2 pawn, which is why you very often, a lot of openings involve moving the D pawn and the E pawn, because that means that when you move the D pawn and the E pawn, both bishops can enter into the game normally. Now, so one way of getting your dark squared bishop into the game might be to push D2 to D3, queen's pawn, right? But if you play D2 to D3, what happens to your light squared bishop?
It gets blocked.
Yeah. So a very common approach or sequence here is to develop one bishop, because you've started off with putting your pawn on E4. So it's like, you quite like a pawn chain C2, D3, E4, right? A light square pawn chain. But if you make that chain, your own bishop would be trapped behind it. So for me, I think that the C4 square or even the B5 square would be good for your bishop, but not D3. D3 would hamper your own development. And at this point in the game, development is your primary objective. Yeah. So I think I agree with developing the bishop, but don't put it on D3, move it a little further.
Okay, so right up to what, like C4, you think?
Well, what do you like about C4?
Well, it develops my bishop, plus I can castle immediately right after that.
Yep.
And plus it's also kind of aiming toward the other bishop. I never really used the scholar's mate, but it's nice to know he's wide open right now.
Yeah. And also, here's another thing. if your opponent castles kingside, where is the king going to end up? What square?
Oh, let's see. On king's. Oh, it'd be right there where the bishop is.
Yeah, it'd be on g8, right? And then your bishop would be gunning right down at that same square. So yeah, let's move the bishop to c4. Okay, just checking that it's safe on there. And here's a tip: before you drop a piece,
Yes.
just hover it over the square where you think you might drop it, and just look and say, is there anything completely dumb about this move? As in, can my opponent capture my piece or have undefended something? But in this case, no, you're absolutely fine. You can drop it. Okay. Now your opponent has taken the other idea of moving the bishop all the way out to b4. Now, the advantage of this move is right now it's in line with your king. But if your king castles, it will no longer be aligned with your king. Okay. So what you've done is you've put your bishop on a square where if and when black castles kingside, it's going to be in line with the king. So different approaches. Now, what it is doing, so this is the key thing, right? When every time your opponent makes a move, you want to say to yourself, what has changed on the board? Okay, so let's try this now. Even if it takes 10 minutes, it doesn't matter, right? So what can you tell me that's changed on the board with the move bishop f8 to b4?
Okay, well, the knight on c3 is definitely in danger.
Well, it's under attack. Yeah.
Sure. Let's see. His bishop is developed. However, the g7 pawn is unprotected.
Excellent. Yeah.
Now he can also, or she can also castle at this point if she wanted to. I mean, her next move.
Yeah.
Let's see. That's really about all I see right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, and that's excellent. So, one other thing: has the bishop moved onto a square where it is protected?
Yes, the knight's protecting it.
Okay. So the thing about that is to say, I mean, one key thing is when you see a piece that's defended by only one other thing, then one thing you might think about is, well, can I, can I attack the defender of the piece? And in this case, not really. It would take you another move to attack that knight, even if you persuaded that knight to move. You're not even attacking the bishop, so So, candidate moves from this point. What would you?
Well, normally what I would do, my first reaction is to play the pawn to a3 and try to push him back out of there.
Yeah.
That's my initial reaction.
And that's a very, very natural reaction. Yeah. However, when you're in the opening phase of the game, I would always say to yourself, so whenever you come up with candidate, so you've given me one candidate move. Is there anything else that you would?
Oh, definitely castle. That would, it would just kind of protect the king. Right now, he's kind of out in the open without any blockers. I mean, he's not being attacked, but he's certainly vulnerable, though.
Yeah.
Let me see. Yeah, those are really the only two that I see right now.
Okay. So let me offer you another idea. So, that we've just said, okay, so you identified very correctly that the bishop is now attacking your knight on c3.
Yes.
Right. Now, one of the things we said was whenever you see something on the board that is defended only once, right? Think about can its defender itself be removed, right? So, with considering that your opponent has just made that change, we're now looking at your own defense, okay? Let's say. So look at your knight on c3, right? This is the knight that has newly become an attacked piece. Let's say, for example, on your next move, you castle, right? Which is a very reasonable move. And then black captures your knight what would you do?
I would take it back with b2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a perfectly good move. Now, if you can picture that snapshot in your mind, what's changed on the board? What is that knight's job right now?
My knight?
Yeah, your knight on c3 is doing something quite important right now.
Well, let's see. It's it's protecting the queen.
Yeah, although, you know, the queen is very well defended by other material. What else is it defending?
It's defending the pawn in front of the rook.
Yeah, the pawn on a2. Yeah, and one other piece. Look on the light squares around it.
Oh, it can protect the king if I have to.
Yeah, potentially. But what else is the knight defending right now? Right there on the board.
Oh, are you talking about c3 or excuse me c2? Because it's blocking it.
No.
Otherwise, I don't see it. I'm not seeing it at all.
The knight on c3 is the only defender of the pawn on e4.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah. So can you see that everything starts with just stating the facts of what's on the board, particularly in the context of what changed on the previous move, right? So
yes.
Let me paint you a picture. Newcastle seems reasonable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Black captures your knight, you recapture with a b pawn, okay? Knight captures your pawn on e4.
Okay.
And you're down a pawn. Suddenly you're down a pawn. So, and that's an important pawn as well, right? Someone once said to me once that if you imagine that your central pawns, your D and your E pawn, are like worth $1, yeah, your C and F pawns are worth about 90 cents, the B and G pawns are worth about 80 cents, and the pawns on the sides of the boards are worth about 70, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's not all pawns are equal, and central pawns are very important. So with this thought in mind, okay, so here we've identified a potential tactical risk, okay?
Okay.
And that is that the knight on c3 that your opponent is attacking, if it's removed, if it's captured, there's nothing defending e4. And you would have to recapture the bishop, and then you'd lose a pawn and an important pawn. So that creates a problem.
Yes.
So how can we solve the problem?
Well, I could bring my queen out to e2, and that would protect the pawn.
Mm-hmm. Perfectly good idea. And it's developing the queen off the back rank, which is a good thing.
So that's the best option I see. I don't see anything that would counterattack the bishop other than that a3.
Well, let's see, if you push a3, you're almost prompting the bishop to take your knight. Then you have to recapture, and then knight takes e4, and again, you're down a pawn. So think again about the normal sequence of development. So we go minor pieces, right? And which is usually knights before bishops, so knights first very often. And you have to move 2 pawns in order to get your bishops out into the board. Right now, you've moved 1 pawn, okay? So you've got 3 of your 4 minor pieces out on the board. So what can we do that solves the issue of the undefended pawn, or potentially undefended pawn, and helps to get your last minor piece out into the board?
d3.
D3. Yeah. I would say d3 is the best move here.
Okay.
Yeah? You see what you're doing? You're doing more than one thing with one move. Okay? And now your opponent has just mirrored you with d6. So now you can go ahead and castle, because if the bishop takes your knight, right now, actually, that knight is also, well, you tell me, what else has changed? When you push d2 to d3, what has changed about the status of the knight on c3?
Well, he's lost one protector, one defender.
That's true. Now it's defended only by the b2 pawn, right?
Yes.
Now, is that knight able to move?
Yeah, he can move.
Hmm.
I mean, here's where I would probably put him into E2 because remember I said I like to control the center.
Yeah, however, that would be illegal. You cannot move that knight right now.
Oh, because yeah, he's in check.
Yeah,
No, he
the
can't move.
knight is in an absolute pin, which means if it moves, the king would be in check, and you're not allowed to do that. So that's again, it's something that's changed on the board, right? So
Yes.
if nothing else, if you could get yourself a piece of paper and just literally and play these games against the bots, right, and say I'm going to take as long as I need. I'm going to write down everything that's changed with this move, and get into the habit of spotting these things. So the knight is pinned. That means the
Yes.
knight can't move. That means, for example, if that knight was attacked by a pawn, it can't escape. Now, right now, it can't be attacked by a pawn, right? But anytime you've got a piece that's pinned, you should always say, can I attack that with a pawn? Or can my opponent attack me with a pawn? Right?
Right.
So, so the knight is pinned. That is it's a potential problem. So, one thing we might want to do is break the pin. So give me a couple of ways in which we might break the pin, as in allow the knight to move if it had to. Let's come up with a couple of ideas.
Well, first, I like the idea of castling.
Yeah.
Because that gets the king totally out of the way, puts him in a better place of comfort there. We could put the queen on D2.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that one as much.
No, because then if you move the knight, bishop takes queen.
Right. She's unnecessarily at peril. Let's see.
And there's two other ways actually. So what you said is, so you've come up with two different ways of actually breaking a pin. One is remove the target. So remove the king. So king G1, castle, kingside, absolute perfectly good move, right? The other thing that you said is queen D2. So what queen D2 is, it's putting more material in between the knight and the king so that the knight is no longer pinned. Yeah, absolutely right. But there are actually three pieces that you could put on D2.
Oh, yeah, the bishop.
Queen is the worst option because effectively the knight would still be pinned, because then if the knight moves, bishop takes queen, and that's very bad.
Yeah, we could put the bishop there.
Yep.
And we could also put the knight that's on E3 in there, or F3. Is that
Yeah.
E or
Yeah.
F?
F3, yeah. So absolutely. So now out of those moves, so queen D2, we appreciate is not great.
Right.
Really, the knight is still pinned, right? Because you don't want to lose your queen. So out of, say, bishop to D2 or knight to D2, which of those moves do you think is the better, and which of those moves do you think is the worst? Considering the phase of the game that we're in and our objective and what we're trying to do, right?
Yes. To me, they're even. I know they're both 3 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In terms of points wise, absolutely true.
Oh, you know what? I think the bishop would be better because if I put the knight in there, I have no knights to use at that point.
Yeah, and also, if you put the knight back to D2, you're moving it backwards. So knights are short-range fighters, right? They work in small spaces. They're wrestlers, right? They're not snipers. Bishops are snipers. Knights are close-range fighters. So knights love to be in the middle of the board. Knights don't like to be around the edges. If a knight is around the edges, it controls far fewer squares as well.
Right.
So there's a couple of things. One is that moving knights backwards if you don't have to is generally not a good idea.
Okay.
Another is that if you put your knight on D2, you remember, why did we push D2 to D3?
Let's see.
Well, we did a couple of things. One was to defend the pawn on E4, but there was another advantage to it.
Oh, because we were controlling the center.
Yeah, but also that we are releasing the dark square bishop. Now, if you put your knight back to d2, you're entombing that bishop all over again.
Right.
Yeah? So queen d2 is very bad. Knight to d2 is quite bad. So that leaves us with bishop d2 or castles as candidate moves. So I would discount the other two. And this is the process that I want you to, get into thinking about.
Okay. Well, one of the things I've pieced together, it's always good to castle as soon as possible. So my guess is to castle at this point, but I'm open to hearing if the bishop's a better idea.
Well, I actually think they're both decent moves. So for me, I would probably castle.
Okay.
One advantage to bishop d2 is this, that if the bishop goes ahead and takes your knight, you can recapture with the bishop rather than the pawn, okay? So some people, like to think, well, I don't really want to move my pawn because that isolates my A pawn and whatever. But I think in this case, it's perfectly fine for you to capture with your B pawn because you're moving a pawn towards the center, which is no bad thing, right? And that later on might, for example, if you imagine your B pawn is where your knight is now, later on, you might be able to push d3 to d4. And then if their pawn takes your pawn, you then recapture with a pawn that used to be a B pawn, and he's now in the middle of the board. So okay. I think, it's generally a good thing. So I would say go ahead and castle now. And here's another thing. Sorry. If you put your bishop to d2, and bishop takes knight, and you recapture with your bishop, look at the scope that bishop has on the board, right?
Yeah, he's got that long diagonal.
Yeah, exactly. It's looking, if your bishop ends up on c3 where the knight is now, it's looking at a dark square pawn chain. It's looking at the end of a dark square pawn chain, right? Or yes, it's looking down towards the rook. That's not necessarily the end of the world, but it's looking at a pawn. And in fact, it's got very few places it can move. It can't go to d4 because pawn takes it. If it goes to b4 or a5, the knight could take it. Right. So actually, that bishop there would be on a bad square right now. Even right now, with your bishop still sat on the back rank, it's controlling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares on the board.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing about bishops. Sometimes bishops can be instrumental in a game without even moving. Right. So I would say yes. Go ahead and castle.
Oops.
Okay. So right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the recording, and I'm going to.
Okay.
So, what do we see?
Well, the first thing I thought about while you were gone is what has changed.
Yep.
And the biggest thing that stands out to me is H7. No.
What? Sorry about that. I hit the wrong thing. Okay.
No problem.
So H7, you're talking about?
Yeah, I thought it was unprotected, but I didn't see the knight, so it is protected.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So here's the thing: in the opening phase of or in fact, at any point in the game, you should be thinking, first of all, is my king safe?
It is.
Yep, he is very snug in there. He's got the perfect setup. 3 pawns all tight to, that's his personal bodyguard, right? They're like the Secret Service guys around a president,
Yes, I like that.
Want to be close. He's got his knight, the defensive knight that helps protect the H2 pawn. That's very good as well. Okay, so he's good. So, do we have any immediate threats? No. Right? Do we have any immediate opportunities? Maybe not. Right? Therefore, what we should do is we should revert to our default. Okay. Now, in the opening phase of the game, we've already said it. The default, what you want to be achieving is what?
Developing my pieces.
Yeah, developing and controlling the board. So, what's left in development for white?
Well, my bishop right now.
Okay.
The C1.
Yeah, exactly. And then maybe the queen, and then finally, the cherry on the cake can sometimes be to centralize your rooks. Okay.
Right.
But other than that, so yes, the bishop, absolutely. So the question is, That bishop has a choice of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares right now. Okay. Now let's look at each of those squares. And this is what I really recommend, right? A lot of beginners will think of a move that looks natural and sometimes a second move, and then they'll stop looking. Okay. Now your bishop has 5 different squares it could move to. Now some of those are better than others, so let's evaluate them. So h6, the furthest one away. What do we think?
Okay.
Oh, he's moved his rook. She's moved her rook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's interesting. So h7, h6, sorry, for the bishop. How do we like that?
I'm not real crazy about it because as soon as I move it there, they could take it with their pawn.
Exactly. So you lose a pawn, you lose a bishop, and what else is bad about that? If G pawn.
Oh, it opens up his rook.
Yeah, so you've got a bad old rook looking straight at your king. Very, very bad move indeed. Right?
Yes.
Okay. G5.
G5 I kind of like because, well, it's got mostly good, some bad. I like it because it pins the knight to the queen.
Excellent. Yeah.
But what's going to happen is every time I've tried something like that, they just move their pawn into an attacking position, which makes me go back when I lose a move or two, depending on how many times they do it.
Okay. So you could get kicked.
Yes.
Yes. And also, if you take the knight,
yes,
black could recapture with the G pawn again, and that again you've got that rook lined up with your king on the G file, and we don't really want to do that. In fact, we don't want to do anything that is going to prompt black to push those pawns on your king side of the board, right?
Right.
So what else has happened on the board? What's changed with the fact that Nisha just moved rook from h8 to g8? What happens when a rook moves? Or what can't happen when a rook has moved?
What do you mean? What can't happen when a rook moves?
Yeah. Well, if a rook moves, then there is a particular maneuver that the rook can no longer do. A maneuver that you have done and that black has not done.
Oh, castle.
Correct.
Oh.
Okay. So, right, the rook has moved. That means the black cannot castle kingside anymore.
Okay.
So, therefore, if black is going to castle and get her king to safety, she's got to go long, queenside.
Okay.
If she's going to do that, she has to move her bishop and she has to move her queen, right?
Yes.
So, this is a good point. Now, this may have a bearing on where you put your bishop. So let's carry on with our exploration. The f4 square, so right in front of your knight.
Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent?
I don't really like it because that pawn could take it immediately.
Yeah, that move sucks.
I mean, pawn for bishop's a pretty nice trade.
Yeah, exactly. No, we don't want to do that at all. So that leaves us again with so maybe g5. Now we've got e3 and d2. We've already looked at d2. D2's a move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
E3, I like it because it targets the pawn on a7.
And if black is going to castle, black's going that away.
Right.
And therefore that bishop then, may become stronger. So I like e3. The other thing I like about e3 is that your bishop is then on a square where it's defended by a pawn. Right? Now, defending things with pawns is a bit nicer than defending things with pieces, because your pieces like to move around and jump around and attack stuff and defend and stuff like that. Pawns spend most of their time sitting still. They're like the plants of the game. They are the structure, the skeleton of the game, right? So defending things with pawns, particularly other pawns as well. Like if you've got a pawn that you have to defend with a piece, that's a bit weird because you're defending a very low value piece with something that's higher value, So,
yeah.
So that's an idea. Another thing, if black decides to go long, castle long. I mean, black may not castle at all, but if she does go long, another thing that happens is that if she trades her bishop for your knight and you recapture with a b pawn, that's actually quite good for you, because then you open up the b file as well. So I would say bishop e3 looks like a very sensible move now.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best one.
It's adding another defender to the pawn on f2. You know, it's all good. What's not to like? So I think that's a perfectly good move. Worry about the
Okay.
and she's taken the knight. Okay. Now, as we've previously said, happy days. There's nothing wrong with this. This is all good, right? So you're going to recapture with your b pawn. Okay. And you've now got a semi-open b file. Oh. Well, this changes stuff. So what just happened? What changed? What's different?
The a7 is no longer protected by the rook.
No, so she's actually got the same structure on both sides of the board.
Right, and she can't castle anymore.
She can't castle anywhere, right? And that means the king is stuck in the middle of the board. Now there's a kind of a rule where if you've got your king to safety, well done, you know, you did it.
Mm-hmm.
And your opponent hasn't, or your opponent can't castle, right? Their king is stuck in the middle. So if you think about it, right, if you get yourself into a spot of bother in a bar, right, and there's like 5 guys trying to beat you up, and you've got a baseball bat, would you rather have your back against a wall or back into a corner, you know? Castling your king, if you're fighting lots of people, right, you want to cut down the angles that they can come at you. You don't want to be in the middle of the room, right, because they can come at you from any angle. And that's exactly the same in chess. You do not want your king in the middle of the board because he can be attacked from all sides by everybody, right? That's one of the reasons why we castle, is to put the king in the corner. When you put your king in the corner, there's only a 90-degree angle that you can be attacked from, right?
Yeah.
If the king's in the middle, there's 180 degrees. It's like half the board, you know, they can attack. So your king is much safer than black's king. Now, so when you've got your king safe and your opponent has not, right, what do we want to do strategically? Can you think?
Well, my thinking right now is take over the center to what are those, the files, the D and E.
Mm-hmm.
My thinking is take over those as fast as possible.
Yeah. I mean, specifically, more than take over, what you want to do is you want to bust them open, right? You want to create open lines down the middle of the board towards that guy, that king on e8. So, excuse me. So, thoughts would include, so you want to break open the middle of the board, okay? Now, my first thought would be to push d3 to d4. But there's a problem with that move. Can you see the problem with d3 to d4?
Let's see.
And this is a key thing. Anytime you move a pawn, you have to do the same thing. Anytime you move a pawn, you have to say, what squares is that pawn protecting now? And what squares am I unprotecting if I move it forwards? Because pawns can never move backwards. It's the only piece that can't retreat in chess.
Well, that pawn does take another square, you know, further from the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does get attacked, I mean, like if I take it, if I were to move that to d4 and their pawn takes, you know, that's wide open right there.
Yeah. Well, if you look at d4, if you imagine your pawn is on d4, it's really important to count the number of attackers and count the number of defenders. Okay. Mm-hmm. How many attackers are there? How many pieces has black got looking at d4 right now?
2.
Okay. And how many pieces would you have defending d4?
Oh, well, let's see. I have 3.
Even more. Keep going.
4 with the queen.
Yeah. Pawn, bishop, knight, and queen are all defending that. So you would, you know, black would not gain anything. You would recapture. You'd be absolutely fine. But there's a problem with d3 to d4. What is it? Specifically, what does it undefend?
The queen?
No, the queen's defended by 2 rooks as well. So,
that other bishop.
yes, the bishop on c4 would be undefended, but this bishop on c4 is not under attack right now. There's another piece that pawn right now is defending, and pawns can only defend 2 people.
Oh yeah, the pawn on e4.
Yeah,
because of the knight.
So we would love to push that pawn in the middle because we want to break open at the center, because black's king is stuck in the center, right? But right now it's not a good idea, because what could take that pawn if it moves?
The knight.
Okay. The knight on f6. Okay, so how could we stop the knight from taking our pawn on e4? And this is a tactic that we've considered before.
I'll be honest, I haven't a clue.
Okay. Your dark squared bishop could still move to g5. This is only an idea, right? But your bishop moves to g5, right?
Yep.
And the knight then can't take on e4 because you take the queen. So you pin the knight. Okay. Now, we've thought about that move before, and we discounted it in favor of bishop e3. But then what happened was Nisha moved her other rook across, which means that king is not going to castle to the queen side anymore, you see. So the whole strategy of the game has changed. Now, this game is all about attacking the center.
Okay.
Right? Another idea. Here's another idea, which is probably better, okay? What did we say was the cherry on the cake of development?
The queen coming out. Or no, I'm sorry, you're connecting the rooks.
The queen coming out. The queen coming out connects the rooks, but there's something else we can do with the rooks, particularly when your opponent can't castle.
Put them in the center.
Put them in the center. So how about rook e1? Yeah. Then, if you move your bishop, the rook defends the pawn from the knight.
Okay.
Yeah. And the rook is in line with his king, with Nisha's king, right? Like, she's got her rook in line with your king, which is a... Oh. Well. What just happened and what just changed?
Well, she took the center of the center. She took where my pawn was. Let's see. That's one less defender on the king, because she was protecting the king.
But what else? The knight. That's just where it's just moved to.
We could take it with the pawn, and there's like no danger of retaliation.
Yep. Yeah, so, I think for me that's a blunder.
That's kind of what I was thinking too.
Pawn takes knight. Yes, it means you've got double pawns and isolated pawns on the c file, right? So again, let's stop. Always stop. Always stop. Always stop and read the board. Okay, we've got isolated pawns there, but you know what that means is when you've got these pawns, these multiple pawn islands, which might be a bad thing, it's not a bad thing when your objective is to line up pieces against the king that's stuck in the middle of the board, right? This is now a good thing for us. So everything's fine. Everything's just fine and dandy. So your opponent has just played knight c6 to knight a5. Why did my opponent make that move? What has changed on the board?
Well, they made that move, I think, to attack the bishop on c4.
Okay, is the bishop defended?
No. No, it's not.
Okay. Something else that we notice is that knight was the only defender of something else.
The queen.
Yeah. I mean, the king is technically defending the queen as well, but also the a7 pawn. Remember the a7 pawn after she moved the rook in?
Yes.
It was the only defender of that, and now it's not. So, a couple of ideas here. Right, one thing that some people might be tempted to do is take your bishop from e3 and capture the pawn on a7, because you're thinking, okay, well, look, she's attacking my knight, my bishop, sorry. What if I capture the pawn and attack her rook? That's like upping the danger levels. That's a good thing. But then what would she do if you capture on a7 and attack the rook?
I assume the rook would go to 8a or a8 and then just attack or counterattack.
Yeah, exactly. And then you've got a knight attacking one bishop and a rook attacking another bishop, and you've only got a pawn for your trouble. So, you know, you're going to lose a bishop. That's the problem, right? So anytime you think about an attack, you think, well, can I be counterattacked in return? So that's not a good idea, right? A better idea could be to retreat your light squared bishop, for example, to b3. Yeah. Now on b3, the knight could still capture it if it wanted to, but then you can recapture with a choice of two pawns, and either one would be okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Another idea, another way of defending the bishop. Can you see another smart way of defending the bishop, considering also that we still actually haven't totally completed development?
Yes, I was thinking the queen to d3 would protect the bishop.
Correct. It would protect the bishop, but there's a better square where you could move your queen that still protects the bishop and threatens black with oblivion. In fact, it's a really good move. Where else could that queen go? That's even evil.
It's evil.
Really evil.
I was when you said it, I was thinking maybe queen to d4, but that pawn would just take my queen.
Yeah, that's not the move I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of threatening checkmate on your very next move. Now, you said at the start that one of the weaknesses that you identify in your game is attacking. When to attack? Well, here's when to attack. Now,
would it be f7, bishop to f7?
That is actually a very, very good move. That is an alternative, yeah. Bishop takes f7 is my favorite move in the whole game of chess. If you take on f7, okay, well spotted. So actually, the move I was thinking of was queen d5.
Queen d5. Oh, geez, yeah.
Right.
I don't know why I didn't see that.
No, it's okay. So queen d5, right? And there are two threats. What are the two threats?
From me?
No, for black to worry about.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yeah. Well, I could take their knight.
Mm-hmm.
I would protect the bishop.
Yeah.
I could also take the pawn on e5. Oh, but I would lose it though if I did.
Okay, no, there's a better pawn to take. What other pawn could you take from there? From the d5 square?
Oh, f7?
f7. And if you take the pawn on f7, what situation do we find ourselves in?
Would that... What? Oh, that would be checkmate then.
Yeah, I would win the game.
Yeah. I didn't think about the bishop behind it.
Yeah. So bishop and queen on the same diagonal, classic attack. Okay. However, your suggestion could even... Right. So the thing is, you move your queen to d5. Black has to prevent checkmate. So right. So how would black prevent checkmate?
If I move my queen to d5?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the queen would have to get involved. No, hold on.
There's a few ways, actually. There's a few decent ways, actually. So, yeah, don't drop your queen there. Let's move the queen back.
No. Okay, I was just hovering.
For example, rook f8 defends the pawn.
Okay.
Queen g7 defends the pawn. Queen f6 defends the pawn. But also bishop to e6 blocks the attack and counterattacks your queen, and your queen has to move.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And then if your queen moves, you've got bishop and a knight looking at your bishop on c4. So in actual fact, yes, it's a checkmate threat, right? But in fact, what you would do is you play bishop d5, sorry, queen d5, right?
Mm-hmm.
She plays bishop e6 and attacks your queen. What do you do then?
Oh, let's see.
Remember, there's two attacks. We said that queen d5 comes with two attacks. One is the checkmate threat on f7, and the other one was?
Oh, that one I'm sorry, I honestly don't remember.
No, it's capturing the knight on a5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what would happen then is you take the knight, bishop takes your bishop, you've traded minor pieces. You know, it's not fantastic, but your idea, bishop takes f7. Okay. Now that comes with what? What do we call it when we're attacking two pieces at once?
That's a pin.
It's a fork.
Fork, sorry.
Pin is when you're attacking a piece and another piece behind it, right? Or a skewer, right? A fork is when you're attacking two pieces at the same time with one move with the same piece. So you're forking the king, which is in check, and the rook. So the king has to take your bishop.
Right.
Okay. So imagine bishop takes f7, king takes f7. Then what move do you have?
Queen to d5.
And that comes with check, right? Because the king's
right.
on. And then the king moves and you capture the knight with your queen. So it's a very similar, option of moves, just in a different order, right? But what's the difference? With one move, if you move queen d5 first, and she brings the bishop out and you take the knight and she takes the bishop, you've traded a knight for a bishop.
Right.
This way, you actually get an extra pawn because you capture the pawn on f7.
Okay.
Yeah. So I like your idea.
And plus, it gets my bishop out of the way of being attacked. So there we go. Now the queen to.
Yeah, and this is a different fork, another fork. So it's a nice move. And the bishop, that's the move we said. And now you pick up the knight, and now you're actually up a full minor piece. Okay.
Awesome.
So this is the point that we have to stop. But can you see, or can you get a feel for the difference in approach, right? Of just slowing down and making yourself read the board, because all the information is there, right?
Yes.
You need to do it in a very conscious way. It's like learning to drive, right? When you learn to drive, you have to be thinking constantly about how to, move the pedals and the gears and everything like that, and how to look around. You have to do it very consciously. Now, after years of driving, you barely have to think about it at all. It's kind of automatic. And chess is very much like that, right? You need to train yourself and drill this, constant conscious effort. Okay. And over time, it will then become more natural and more second nature, but really invest the time now, play 2-hour games, 3-hour games, daily games, if you need to, but you've got to get into the habit of seeing everything on the board and telling the story of everything on the board. But that's where we have to leave it, because we've got to start the next live session next, but I hope that's been really useful for you, my friend.
Oh, no, I love it. Can I schedule another one sometime after I've played a few rounds?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, and just leave this game. Feel free to go back to this game. You're in a really good position. You should be able to beat her.
Okay.
Hey, but I have to drop out. Are you going to join Christina's call?
Yes, I am. I will be there momentarily.
Okay, well, I'll be there in 1 minute. Okay, take care.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye then.